right, welcome everyone. Thanks for coming out and joining us for this panel. My name is Thomas Arnett, and I'm a senior research fellow at the Clayton Christian Institute for Disruptive Innovation. And I'm excited to be joined by these wonderful people here at my right. To give you a real quick, the premise of our panel is this. A lot of schools find that off-the-shelf technology just doesn't quite align with schools' particular instructional practices and teachers' particular instructional practices. And so a lot of schools end up cobbling together solutions from different providers, trying to make them work well together, trying to align them with their instructional needs, and then often building their own homemade resources to fill in those gaps. But the people here at my right have taken unique approaches to attack this challenge head on. So first here I have Tyler Sussman. Tyler is the Director of Partnerships at Summit Public Schools. Next I have Prasad, who is the founder and the CEO of an edtech company called Gooru. Then Dr. Louise Waters, the CEO of Leadership Public Schools, and Colleen Broderick, the Vice President of Pedagogy and Research at AltSchool. So to kick this panel off, I have this question. I'm going to target it first at Tyler and Louise. The question is this. So you run public schools in the state of California. The state of California gives you money to educate students. It doesn't give you money to do tech R&D. So why did you decide to get involved in the business of developing software?
Louise, would you like to start?
Okay. Well, basically, so our network is intercity, urban high schools. And we really felt that there was a lot of potential power from the use of technology. Particularly, our students tend to come into high school around the 5th grade level, and we want them ready for college without remediation 4 years later. So there's a huge amount of acceleration that we need to do. And most ed tech that is available is not designed for that market because it's not a market that actually has a lot of cash. And so it's what ed tech talks about as being the potential, but it's not where funders go, and it's not where the products are. Products tend to be at the elementary level in reading and math. They don't tend to be high school physics for students who are performing below grade level. So we needed, if we were going to meet our mission and really achieve our goals and wanted to harness the power of technology, we needed to strike out on our own.
Tyler?
Thanks. We got into technology R&D based on need, based off of our instructional model. So first and foremost, Summit Public Schools is founded on a theory of teaching and learning that intends to prepare every student for success in four-year college and university and to be thoughtful, contributing members of society. In order to prepare students for that environment, we have a four-pronged approach of instructional pillars, things like mentorship and goal setting for students, competency-based progressions through content, a project-based learning environment that has a focus on developing cognitive skills. To bring that learning environment to life, we went out actually 5 or 6 years ago and were looking for the tools that could do it, and found that, similar to Louise's point, nothing in the ed landscape was really designed with that learning model in mind. And instead of trying to fit a round peg in a square hole, we decided that we would first go off and make it ourselves so that it was actually based off of what was needed for classroom instruction, and then have expanded and improved upon that tool through partnership with technology organizations.
Okay, so all that sounds really nice. Good, vision for how you want instruction to work, how you want technology to work with it. But I think the golden question in all of this is, how do you make the business model work? Like I said, California isn't giving you money to say, go build technology. So how do you make the business model side of this all work?
Mm-hmm. So we couldn't, so we partnered. So we have been through many phases of learning. First, we built internally, but building internally basically with a low-tech, whatever could be done using the Google suite of free tools. Mm-hmm. And some really smart people.
So Google Docs, Google Spreadsheets.
Exactly, Google Forms, Google on steroids. And we got quite a ways, but those are not scalable even within our schools. So pretty soon our demand outstripped it. Then we tried a bunch of different routes for scaling. became clear that we were great at the R&D, at the design, at the prototyping, but scaling is not our business, and that's not our business model. So then we found or were matched with Gooru, which is a edtech nonprofit, and they have all of the engineers and technologists that can take our prototypes and integrate them into something that really is scalable and supportable.
And Sarah?
Yeah, so we've had the good fortune to be in close partnership with a number of foundations that has allowed us to first develop that technology platform. We are collaborating with a team of software engineers out of Facebook that were given on loan to our program. That team of engineers is now moving over to the Chan Zuckerberg Initiative, but essentially by having a high-powered team of engineers that are supporting the program, we're able to provide a high-quality free platform, both for our own schools and for the partner schools we work with around the country. And a number of other foundations have pitched in to ensure that the training and support schools need to bring personalized learning to life in their classrooms doesn't come at a cost to those schools or out of Summit's own budget, but is provided so that folks can do this work.
Okay, so it sounds like you're thinking outside the box. LPS found a partnership that worked. You've been able to get funding from philanthropy to get engineers to build stuff for you. I want to now go to Colleen. You're in a unique spot in this, in that you're the only one here that represents a private school. And private school has a different financial model. You're venture funded, but I imagine that venture capitalists aren't giving you money to go build schools across the entire country. So what's your plan for building technology that can actually scale and have impact beyond a few school sites?
Yeah, I think a couple of things to highlight is one, our strategy. And our strategy is really to work with a network of lab schools. We have 7 lab schools that we work with alongside engineers, project manager, and designers. So we're all in the work together, and our goal is to use those labs to essentially ensure that we are using that partnership to build the tools that really make a difference for personalization. And I think very much like we're hearing, there is a complexity to personalizing for students that sometimes is hard to really glean and understand unless you're in the field or an educator or in the classroom a lot. And so our engineers work side by side with our educators to build the tools that enable them to amplify the best practices that support personalization and to simplify other tasks that they don't need to spend their time doing. So very much to tackle the challenge of really accelerating growth. Our strategy isn't to continue to grow private schools. Those are spaces that we've created very intentionally. We staff very intentionally, and we are not looking to replicate. That space is for us to learn, to put those lessons into the platform in service of other learning organizations. So our real strategy is to partner. Next year, we'll have our first 4 partners, and we have a pipeline expanding to about 150 by 2020. And the goal is not to remain within the private sector. We're in the private sector now, so that there is an agility to our work outside of some of the constraints of the public market, but move in to support the public market. Our investors get this. They get how hard it is to do this work. And we're probably one of the only folks in Silicon Valley that have like a 10-year vest on investment, which is kind of unheard of. And so we recognize to really do this well is going to take time.
Mm-hmm. So I think there's questions that are coming up about scale. It sounds nice. I think what we'll get to a little bit later is how do you actually scale these solutions beyond your own perfectly walled gardens? But first I want to go to Prom. Prom, you are working with LPS, and you've taken your technology and you're working on aligning it to help facilitate their teachers' use cases. But your vision is bigger than that. How do you manage the tension? And I assume there is tension between meeting LPS's needs versus thinking about all the other people that are using your platform.
Yeah, that's a great question. We started by thinking about scale first, right? We didn't start by saying let's kind of work with LPS and kind of build a solution for LPS and then figure out how we want to scale or bring schools into the fold. So we said, and when we looked at what it takes to kind of quote unquote support education, it's not just about schools, it's not just about technology, it's about all the education research that's happening, right? That has happened over the decades, right? When Johns Hopkins talks about cooperative learning, when Harvard talks about real-time assessments or peer feedback and peer grading from UCLA and so forth, it's like we cannot build tools completely ignoring what people have done for 3 decades, number one. Number two, similarly, when you look at all the content people are creating, right? We cannot be the ones who are creating our set of digital material when there are, phenomenal experts who have created millions of these items. Again, when it comes to implementation, it's the same thing. The experts who understand what it means to implement in schools. What we see with the for-profit companies generally is they kind of try to put that entire universe within their organization. So we started with this view that we want to be a non-profit but a technology play and stay focused on being engineers for educators. And then find the rest of all the partners that we want, whether it is Leadership Public School or National University in San Diego or Johns Hopkins and so on and so forth. We constructed all of these partnerships, whether we want to do data science, we want to do learning science, whether we want to do co-creation with schools or co-creation with the first 2 years of university. And that's kind of been our entire model. And of course, do it in a way that is sustainable as well. So.
Mm-hmm. So I want to push on that a little bit and ask, the partnership model makes sense, to partner with all these different partners, to bring in the expertise that goes beyond, kind of to focus on here's where our expertise is. It's being engineers for educators and then bringing in other experts to help make things more robust. How do you address the needs of the teachers in the classrooms though? How do you make sure, given all the variety of different teachers doing personalized learning in different ways, how do you build something that meets or at least appeals to those different needs of teachers?
So clearly, everybody will need something slightly different, right? So if we sat down and said, how do we build Google Docs today? And we asked 1 million teachers for their inputs, they'll give certain inputs and you kind of distill all of that, synthesize all of that and say, hey, this is what we are going to do. But by taking an open source approach, we said, hey, this whole thing is open sourced. So if you want to go take it in some other direction, feel free to do that, right? You just have to bring a set of funding and engineers and they can kind of, make the delta changes that they want from there, right? And this makes it attractive for everyone else to participate because now it's not like they're supporting a company or supporting somebody who owns proprietary code, but they're actually kind of participating in the open source activity here.
Louise, did you have something you wanted to share?
Yeah, I think there's another fundamental design principle. The design of the Gooru Navigator platform and the work that we've been doing together it's not just personalized learning, it's also personalized teaching. And we've specifically built the tools and the platform to be modular, to be flexible. So you can, if you want to only use real-time assessment, you can only use real-time assessment. If you want to organize things differently, if you want to change out the content, the assessments, it's very modular and flexible, and it's designed that way because every context is different. You have a new teacher, you have an experienced teacher, you have different subjects, different ages, and also you have different levels of ease with technology, and we are specifically building to be able to take teachers from where they are, which might be just a tiny bit of personalization, all the way to if you're going to full blended learning and personalized learning. So we want to be able to move teachers as well as move students. But I think that's a core design principle of our platform.
All right.
To jump in, I think there's another element to consider when building the technology, and I think it was Ford that said, if I ask my customer what they want, they would say a faster horse. And I think that's true in some respects in the ed tech space as well, in that teachers have a sense of what they need to support learning. but don't always imagine if something else was in place, the impact that it could have. And so, at AltSchool, I feel incredibly privileged, and we're uniquely positioned that our engineers are in the classrooms with the teachers every day and doing incredibly what seems like silly things in terms of sitting there watching a teacher grade of how they move through and assess something. What do they consider? How do they organize? What order do they go? To literally think about how can we create a different solution to supporting that work stream of a teacher that enables them to free up the space towards personalized learning. I think the other piece to consider with this is if we are really looking to change the landscape of education, we have to recognize that it's very, very difficult to disrupt the space that we're in. And that in our strategy, we're really trying to provide this parallel path in which we have the space to be a little bit more agile. And in that, we are able to move in different ways and test our product literally changing day from day to day on a level of iteration that's not incremental different change, but is really significant. And when you think about those changes, you think about, leadership needs to change, or what teachers do and professional development needs to change. There needs to be a way to accelerate that through the technology. Otherwise, we're spending another 10 years skilling up an industry instead of skilling up a child that can step into any environment and learn.
Mm-hmm. So I'm going to push a little bit. All this sounds nice, sounds ideal, but I think there's a tension here that I don't know that we've dug into yet. So in Clay Christensen's Stories of Disruptive Innovation, one of the stories we often tell is Sony, and how Sony's little pocket radio with transistor radio ended up disrupting companies like RCA and Zenith with these big fancy vacuum tube TVs and tabletop radios. But a part of the story that often doesn't get told is how it was really a disruption by Sony that it was in combination with another value network partner, and that was the discount retailers. So when Sony first came out with their pocket radio, they tried to sell it through department stores, and the department stores said, we're not interested in this. Because the department stores had a revenue model where they made money off of servicing vacuum tube powered devices, because those vacuum tubes would blow out, they need to come in and get repaired. Transistor radio didn't need repairs like that. So the department stores didn't want to sell these things. So they really started by selling through this other disruptive partner, these discount retailers like Kmart and Walmart. So here's a tension I see, is that we can talk about how we want to advance personalized learning with the technology, and we can talk about how then you need to change teaching practices, and we need to change professional development. But you've got schools that are doing things a certain way that aren't necessarily going to be quick to just jump on board and say, okay, just, we're ready to throw out what we've done in the past and do it your way. How do you manage that tension? I imagine Summit's probably the furthest along with the Basecamp program. Now Summit Learns that is working with other schools. And I've heard people say, well, Summit is really prescriptive. They tell us you have to do our model our way. How have you navigated that tension where schools, when schools don't want to do it the Summit way?
Yeah, absolutely. I think the Summit Learning Program is intended to be that distribution network that allows teams around the country that are interested in personalizing instruction for their students, jump on board, run through the change management process from whatever classroom environment they have, whether it's a very traditional one or one that is already innovating in a lot of these ways, and then move from there towards the full understanding of what we call Summit Learning, which is our iteration of personalized learning. I think that we certainly wouldn't want the idea to be out there that it is overly prescriptive. Within the framework, schools are able to adapt and customize curriculum in some of the ways that were just shared. What we do ask schools to commit to is the idea of setting long-term goals for students, the idea of implementing a project-based learning environment, and the idea of allowing students to move at their own pace through content. So when we're looking for partner organizations and when schools are really coming to us, they're folks that are deeply aligned to that core philosophy. And when that's in place, we find that they're able to innovate within the rest of the model.
And what do you let them, what do they often innovate on? What is it that schools end up doing differently than the way Summit does it in their schools?
Yeah, I think the way that classes are structured, some folks have specific traditional blocks or specific traditional classes. Other folks have gotten rid of schedules entirely, and students are moving at their own pace through interdisciplinary projects. I think the curriculum itself, we provide a full 4th through 12th grade curriculum to schools around the country. Once they sign on, it's theirs to own. So they can edit, they can modify, they can delete, they can build new projects and build new courses. And even down to the idea of the advisory and the mentorship relationship. That looks really different at different school sites. In some places, that mentor follows students throughout 4 years and has a deep connection. It's built on top of other advisory programs. In other places, it's very limited to academic conversations, and schools can innovate there.
So when schools are doing that innovation, do you find though that they dilute the Summit model to the extent that they're not getting the results you're getting? Or do you find that all the schools across the board are finding what works for them and succeeding?
So we hope it's the latter. We've only been with schools around the country for a few years now, but the idea is even the word model we try and avoid. We hope that we have a set of tools and resources, and when we work with a school organization, we can provide those tools and resources for free, and they can adapt them to fit the context of their learning environment, and a lot of it's going to be dependent on the vision of personalized learning that they have within their organization.
Now, Louise and Prom, I've seen some of the incredible results that LPS has gotten as they've shifted towards these new models and used this technology that you've co-built together. But I understand you're also working to try and expand the scale, get what LPS is doing out there for more schools. Tell us a little bit about those efforts and what's worked and what's not worked.
You said Louise and Prom.
Well, so one of the things, I think we're at a couple years behind Summit. Our diffusion model is quite different. And so that's a nice place to be when you're asked for the statistics, because one of the things we had to do was really put all of the elements that it took to do kind of this personalized teaching and learning into place. And what we've been using so far has been a portion of them. Now coming out for this coming school year will be the full-blown. Our theory and what was the contagion within LPS and a few other places that are using what we're doing is demand pull. And that if you can get teachers started on an element of personalization, then that changes things they didn't think were possible, particularly in the use of assessment, that and what the power of data and how you can change your instruction in the moment, and then that drives the interest in having an array of materials to differentiate, which then drives an interest in students setting goals and monitoring their own progress. And it's kind of like a stone in the water and the ripples going out, and you drive that demand and people are wanting more. And that's more our theory of diffusion. And what, up until this point, the rings on here were more in the beta phase at LPS, and so we're going to test out the results of this theory this coming school year. So maybe you can add some.
So one of the things that we see is that the other edtech providers, let's refer to them as LMS providers, they have been investing huge amounts of work in their own side of innovation, building different types of tools for classroom practices, building different model, kind of the productivity tools for workflow improvements and so on and so forth. So we kind of provide a mechanism for them to integrate the Gooru capabilities into their product. So as a result, we, for example, Gooru is being used in Europe, not because we have gone to Europe and we have kind of proselytized the use of Gooru, but because somebody kind of, a European LMS provider integrated Gooru into their stuff. So this way we allow for the diffusion to happen through channels that already exist. And so there are existing providers of every service that you can think of, and what they are really looking for is somebody who has the rest of the solution as it pertains to personalized learning. So
tell me if this is a mischaracterization, but one way I see this is that Summit's got a system that you kind of have to decide, are you bought into this? That you sound like you were saying you screen to make sure that the schools that are adopting Summit share that vision, and then you have a grade level team or a team at the school that comes on board together. But what I'm hearing from you guys is that with Gooru, it's almost like there's a gateway drug there. There's these little tiny pieces, maybe it's in the assessment piece, maybe it's some other piece, that you hope that a teacher, and it doesn't even have to be a whole grade level team, that a teacher might bite on and say, I like this, and that will lead to more personalization.
And then also the sleeper strategy, which is that we don't really care if it has Gooru on it or LPS. One of the really interesting things is that there's a school that's using a lot of what's part of the Gooru platform and has a centerpiece of what they're doing. And they asked Pram where was the school that they could find out about it, and it was LPS. I mean, they didn't know who it was. So, and Gooru is integrated, like Pram said, in a number, particularly overseas, a number of LMS providers. So that's the stealth diffusion, and then there's the instructional practice diffusion, which is what you're saying. Yeah, the gateway drug.
Okay.
And the only thing I would add to that is that in the Summit Learning Program, there is that full adoption across a grade level. Oftentimes over the course of the year, there's what we would call an implementation roadmap, where different teams, based on the position that they're coming from and what they happen to be focused on, will dig more deeply into the mentorship component first, or dig more deeply into the project-based learning. And then, because it truly is a system, an ecosystem that they're bringing to life, the other pieces sort of naturally follow. And then I would also add that while the full Summit Learning Program is that sort of whole stack approach, the platform itself is also available outside of the program. So we definitely have individual teachers signing on around the country using one of the curriculums, the math or the science or the history, at their single grade level, just within their own classroom. And often that's where a new school will come to us because one teacher was innovating in that way. The other teachers saw what was going on in that classroom, got really excited, and then wanted to participate in the full program.
All right, Colleen, I hope you haven't felt sidelined, that I've just been pitching all the questions to the nonprofit people up here on the stage.
I don't feel sidelined at all.
So tell us about, at AltSchool, you've also got a strategy for scale. And to me, from what I've read, it seems like it's a pretty slow strategy. And maybe that's good in that it's slow and deliberate. You make sure you do things right before you race ahead too far. But I have heard people raise the criticism of, doing ed tech and personalized learning in a private school in downtown San Francisco is totally different than doing it in a public school where you're serving high proportions of students with free and reduced lunch, English language learners. So, how do you think that what you build at AltSchool is actually going to be able to work for the rest of the country?
Yeah, I think it's a great question, and certainly one that we know is very much on our radar. Our student body is, yes, private, but we do have students on scholarship, and so it's perhaps not as ideal as you paint it. I think we know that learning is complex for any child, and certainly our kids and our families are fortunate. I think there's, a couple of things as I listen to everyone, and I think, gosh, if, like Pram's saying, if we combined efforts, imagine the way we could accelerate. So I go to assessment, for example, where we probably can add the greatest value at this point is really around how do we collect a full portfolio of assessment and be able to synthesize it and give educators good insight to where their kids are as learners. We're not looking to build then all the content that goes to match that. Like, looks like we might have partners right here. Like, why do the work where others already have a runway? In terms of our strategy for scale, it really is about our partnerships. So next year, our 4 partners are similar to us. They are micro schools, they are small, they are early in their development, they are in the private sector. As we look further out on our partner pipeline, we're looking to expand the number of variables that we play with within our platform. So moving into potentially the charter market and then into public school districts. So
in that scale strategy, is your hope that this really custom designed, aligned platform is going to become more and more modular and more adaptable? Or is it that hopefully everyone will see how brilliant AltSchool's approach is, and then other people will say, well, we're just going to do it that way because it works?
Yeah, I don't think what we're trying to do is to create the model that enables everyone else. What we're trying to do is ensure that people have access to the right tools that enable them to do the best job with technology and the best job with kids. Ultimately, that may not be a school environment. That could be some other learning organization as well. So we're not looking to say, do it like AltSchool does. And in fact, if you look across our 7 sites right now, they're all different. They approach things differently. They have a different flavor unto themselves, and we learn from those variations within our own schools. So I think really it's not to become modularized because we're very systemic, and I think that's part of its power, that what you do in one moment of instruction with a child translates into assessment, translates into communication with families, translates into better understanding of where that student is on their own progression. We don't want to lose the power of that system.
I'm going to now go on a little bit of a tangent and go back to prom. In my research on LPS and Gooru's partnership, one of the things that I found fascinating was your particular business model. You're running a tech company, but it's a nonprofit. And the way that you found to run it as a nonprofit and be able to build technology, but also make everything free and open and accessible is really interesting. Can you talk a little bit about how you found that sweet spot?
Yeah, this is kind of one thing. We learned this along the way. We thought that we would get foundation support and we would be able to kind of create the nonprofit and still be a tech play. You know, companies like Wikipedia or Mozilla foundations and so forth were great examples to think of initially. What we realized was we got huge foundation support, but only for innovation, right? As long as we said, hey, we were going to do this next cool thing, then foundations would be interested in that. But if we said, no, you know what, the teacher that we served in the last year, she's expecting that we're going to be around this year too, right? And that student thinks that we're going to be there for all 12 years. So that's kind of where we realized that because we do so much technology, we have the opportunity to license the technology to tech companies. And why would tech companies want the technology that they could otherwise access through open source and so forth? So we had to come up with what is the value we bring to them is not that here is a piece of software that you can integrate, but actually it's the value of our network, that we listen to research scientists, we work with data scientists, we work with co-create with schools, we work with the first 2 years of colleges. So we bring you all of that value and in exchange for a mission support fee. So we then kind of formalize this as, yeah, we'll innovate with funding and operate with revenues. So, and that model seems to be working and will scale for us as well. So.
Do you think that's a business model you could put out there for the rest of the field to say, hey, try this, or is it?
I think you should write about it, and, and people should try it. It's clearly very nuanced, right? And different people in different circumstances may take a slightly different approach, but the general idea that if you're building something that's valuable, and this should be part of every system. You know, we think of LMS systems. We're not building an LMS system. We don't do all the productivity capabilities that LMS providers provide, right? We exclusively focus on what is the learning outcome for this student, right? That's why we call it a navigator. It's a GPS for learning. It's about knowing where the student is at every point. It's not just focusing on the destination and saying you're going to be doing Algebra 1 because you're in the 9th grade class, even if you're not ready with fractions kind of stuff, right? So we think this approach will work where all the other companies can benefit from this network that we have pulled together, the group of other experts that we have pulled together and distill that within our product.
So, you know, Pram was courting me, so to speak, for a year. And I was
yes.
Yeah, we should hear the love story, right?
Yeah. And I was as concerned about his business model as his engineering, because we had gone the funders route and also found that the next thing was, and it was the innovation, not the iteration, not the support, not the scaling, scaling if it was millions, but not the scaling within the practice that they were interested in funding. And we also, for about that long, I was CEO of an ed tech for-profit, learned my lesson with that one, but and did Sand Hill Road, and people were not, there was no business model for the kind of technology that we want. I kept constantly being told, no, what you need to do is you need to focus on elementary reading. I go, yeah, but I have high school students that can't read. But no, you need to focus on elementary school because their parents will pay. And I said, yeah, their parents, the high school, inner city high school physics students' parents is not a good revenue generation. And so it really, it's just been around various funding models. And this hybrid approach seemed to me like something that could represent a strategy that has sustainability. Because from a school perspective, it's my biggest investment is the time and political capital I put in changing my teachers' behavior. And if I change the behavior and then the product that I've changed their behavior to do is flipped and disappears because somebody bought it to take it apart for parts, then I have just lost all the capital I had invested in changing the practice of my teachers. That was more, sustainability and stability was more important to me than revenue.
Now, I'm going to ask a question. I hope it doesn't destroy the beautiful love story you've had. But do you ever wish that you could be like AltSchool or be like Summit and just have your own engineers and build it your own way, that you didn't have to negotiate things with Gooru?
You know,
That was for you.
I figure, just like any long-term marriage, behind the door in all the other marriages are some issues too, and it always looks greener on the other pasture, but yes, would I love to have all the Facebook money? Yeah, that would be nice. There are pluses and minuses, and I'm okay.
So, taking this one step further, like a good marriage, there's things that happen behind the scenes. Can you tell us a little about what you worked out behind the scenes? Because I've heard that there were shifts, that there were difficult conversations of trying to come to the same page and the same understanding. Can you tell us a little bit about the time and the conversations that had happened?
That happens all the time. And it mostly has to do with timing, because of what, the time, what needs to happen in order to scale, in order to support the larger Gooru mission and the larger people who are contributing and generating the behind-the-scenes revenue with the timeline that we would like for LPS. And so that's just a constant conversation.
Yep.
I think, but to piggyback on that, AltSchool is not without its challenges as well, and I think timing of a different nature, right? Here we have a group of engineers that are incredibly fast. To watch them put together a scope for a product, as opposed to supporting curricular design in the classroom, is a very different pace of work. And to line up those efforts in ways that really benefit learning, I don't think it matters what construct you're working in. This is just a big, hairy problem to figure out in terms of bringing all the right people to the table to come to a solution.
So
I'll just jump in here quickly. So clearly the advantage that at least we have seen is what Louise and her team does with the LPS stuff is clearly her expertise, and she has that whole thing figured out and decades of experience. And what I do with whether it's the technology side or the business model side and so forth. That's my focus and attention all the time, right? So this allows us to kind of go deep in both areas and provide the right set of approach. So what we had to agree upon were the set of principles that we will not violate, right? That we believe in, that learning begins with the teacher, education is a human right. We kind of have to do this as a free and open solution. It is about collective impact. It's not about one organization is going to somehow change education tomorrow because of this, we are not one new algorithm away from disruption, as one of our good friends recently mentioned. So to me, that's kind of the idea here is, can we kind of have a shared mission? Clearly, Louise and I are as different, if you haven't noticed already, and the bald and the beautiful, I would say. Right? But can we agree upon a common mission and common purpose and play to our strengths as opposed to continuously either try to learn the other person's skill or compromise?
So we had to become bilingual. The organization's system, the word system to him meant very different things than the word system to his people and my people. That one word spent quite a long time before we found out we were talking about completely different things.
Just adding on to this, I think that this relationship and interaction between engineers and educators is actually probably more similar in the three organizations than the differences are. I think some of the long-term goals that you were just mentioning, we're all working in the same direction. We're trying to impact teaching and learning systems and provide resources that can help schools meet the needs of their students. I think that too often in this field, folks are put at odds with one another almost, but I think we're all actually very much under the same tent, and there's room for all of us under the tent, and there's a lot of work that needs to be done and can be done at schools around the country.
So in terms of the future of all this, do you see Summit's system or Gooru's system or AltSchool system being like the Microsoft Windows or the Apple of the future, where schools across the country all are using one of these core systems? Or do you think these are just research pilots that will lead to continued diversity of systems across the whole education system? Using the word system and hopefully not confusing people.
I can start. Yes, to think that these three systems would be the Microsoft and Google and Facebook of education is a nice thought, but the reality is this space is evolving really fast, and even our classroom models. We have talked about changing the classroom from all seats facing the teacher to something circular and more of workstation model and things of that nature. But we even today, people cannot anticipate how it will be in 5 years from now, when technology becomes more ubiquitous, when artificial intelligence has a bigger role to play, when data analytics has a bigger impact and so on. So to me, I think realistically, these are phenomenal experiments, and at least our thinking around making it all open and free is that we want people to build from it, and a good solution will emerge, whether it is the solution that we have thought about today or something else. So.
I think the piece I would add to that is, I'm sure on some level, all of us, and certainly AltSchool perhaps more publicly, it's not just about changing schools, it's about transforming education. And I think if we think about our work as really having impact just at a school level and not considering the impact that it can have for learning in general, it's short-sighted. And I agree that the field continues to change, and is this the one or that the one is probably naive to put out there. But I think it's this moment where we can act on what we know to be true around learning to really expand options for students and expand opportunity for students.
Yeah, I would add to that to say that I think the tools that are currently being created by all three of our organizations, or all four of our organizations, are allowing for disruption in education. I would liken it to the advance of the cell phone after having dial and line phones for the last 100 years. And what we've created, it's not the iPhone yet. I think it's the block brick phone from like the late 80s. And
We're still with the core.
right, and it's whether one of these evolves into the iPhone, that would be really exciting, and it might happen, or something else might stand up and learn from these examples and take it even further. But it seems like the direction that we're heading is a direction that is better allowing us to meet the unique needs of students and to help them develop into the learners that they can be, which is the exciting part.
Well, it's good to see that you're all interested in the betterment of students' lives and the rest of the world, not world domination. So
I'm on my best behavior.
We got 4 minutes left. One last question for you. What is the role of professional development in all of this? Both internally, as you're trying to get your own teachers to change their instruction, evolve their instruction, and then broadly, as you're trying to scale and have impact beyond your own schools, what is the role of professional development in all of this?
I could start with this one. I think for us, when we think about the Summit Learning Program in collaboration with schools around the country, so we're in 130 schools outside of, Summit itself operates 11 schools in California and Washington State. The Summit Learning Program services 130 schools around the country. It'll be roughly 300 schools around the country next year. And I would say that program, PD actually comes far before the technology tool. It's the theory of instruction that schools are aligning around. And then in support of that, there's an onboarding experience, there's training programs, there's ongoing support. All of those things come first. The learning platform, the technology, is just a tool in the teacher's belt that they can use throughout the school year as they're bringing that philosophy of learning to life. For us, it's been, 1,500 teachers last year coming through week-long PD experiences where they get support around the change management process, around those pillars of instruction and how to do them, around stakeholder engagement, et cetera. And I would say that if you asked a teacher that was in our program what the Summit Learning Program was, that PD would probably be the first thing that comes to mind.
I think PD is the real tough nut to crack. And that the technology pales beside the PD, but how do you do PD in a scalable way? And I was, and exactly how can you leverage technology to make that possible? We had an unintended experiment with one of the element that became the real-time assessment for Gooru. When we had that as a standalone tool, we got a grant to train the trainers. And in the grant, over 3 years, we got about 35 teachers really proficient. In that same time, we also had put a lot of online resources, PD resources. We got 400,000 teachers coming on and using as regularly as the teachers that we did the train the trainer model. Now, I wasn't in their classroom, I couldn't see the fidelity, but I do know in the train the trainer model, we had principal transitions, we had pregnancies, we had a bunch of things. I can't tell you that the fidelity was great there. And somehow we really, and there's a lot of interesting seedlings going with professional development and how you leverage technology. I don't think anyone has actually cracked it yet.
All right, we've got 1 minute and 20 seconds left. Colleen, your take on PD.
Oh, that's such a hard one for me to end on. I've spent most of my career in professional development, and I will say what I'm hearing is certainly the best of what we know. And yet, I think that is still going to take a long time. And I think professional development needs to change considerably. And I think it begins with empowering teachers to understand who they are as learners first. And I think it begins with supporting teachers and beginning with understanding how they reach to resources for support. I think it's about building networks. I think anything that certainly begins to change the paradigm of the role of the educator is the only professional development that's going to begin to change this landscape.
All right.
And that's for another panel.
Thanks. All right. Thank you all for joining us this afternoon. As one last housekeeping comment, they have another session coming in here, so we need to exit and drop off our microphones. And if you want to talk to anyone here, please meet them outside of the room. And with that, please help me thank our panelists.